ultimately that's one of, if not the biggest cost of any landlord, is vacancy. So that's like problem number one. How do we solve vacancy? So the remote showings was certainly step one. Get more people in faster. Can do more showings per day, yielding you more applications per day, reducing that vacancy time.
Hello, professional property managers. Andrew Smallwood here, host of the Triple Win podcast, and I'm joined by Arvand and Nick today from Ziprent. Excited to talk to these guys. Really just got connected with them recently, but they've got some really interesting things they're working on that I think this audience will get a lot of value from and stimulate some good conversation and some good discussion. So guys, first off, just want to say welcome to the pod. Thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So, hey, for those who don't know you, aren't familiar with you and Ziprent, can you guys give a little background of what were you doing before you were in property management? How did you get into this industry, and what kind of led to the birth of the venture that you guys are on here? And Arvand, I may tee you up first for that one.
Yeah, sounds good. So I actually had a different startup in the web hosting field about a decade ago. I grew that and in a organic fashion, kind of one customer at a time. It got to a pretty good size. When I sold that business, I got into real estate. I started, owning a few single family, smaller multifamily buildings. And around in the late 2010s, 2017, 2018 is when I realized, I'm remotely managing these properties, but I can't really remotely place tenants because they're all kind of spread out. I kind of spread them all out across a larger geographic region. And I was using different brokers in different regions. And as you might know, it's like, say, in Bay Area where I'm located, you're going to find a property manager in the city of San Francisco might not cross bridges. So if you have 3 properties spread out in the Bay Area, you're going to need to use 3 different brokers to place tenants. So it just kind of became important for me, at least for my portfolio, to be able to come up with a streamlined, uniform fashion of treating that turnover process when a tenant leaves and to acquire new tenants. So I have a set expectation for how long is it going to take? Where are we at? Or is it working? Should we drop the price? That sort of thing, which wasn't very transparent to me at that point in time. So that's how Ziprent was born, really. It was to create a tenant placement product that was highly transparent and also pretty lean from an operational perspective, to really concentrate on the touch points that are absolutely needed to place that tenant into the property. And then we went from there, right? You place the tenants, and then I was like, okay, well, we built the software for that. Let's handle rent collection. It's just one of the easiest parts. And then you go into kind of dealing with all the repairs processes and automating as much of that possible. Then you go into turnovers, and turnovers become either renewals or relisting the property. So every one of those processes we started tackling over time within the last 4 years to try and perfect them as much as possible.
Yeah, thanks for that backdrop. And Nick, would love if you could share a little bit of your background too before and how you got into property management.
Yeah, so I had once aspirations of being a neuroscientist at UCSD and quickly pivoted to kind of a product design focus. So I did the product design world for, like a small CRM company based out of San Diego, cut my teeth helping build that product, did some light agency work in the interim, and then I kind of serendipitously met Arvand while traveling. And we both realized we're from the same area, and he was having this kind of tenant placement problem that he was trying to solve back in 2016, 2017. And I think the opportunity was too good to just start helping out and starting to cut my teeth on the property management world, helping kind of build out that product. And now we find ourselves 5 years later and 3,400 units under our belt. So not something that I set out or had a particular, calling for, but it just so happened to kind of fall into both of our laps, and here we are.
Yeah. And I think people are going to have, an interest. I'm sure we'll get into more of like the tech platform and some of the unique, things that you guys are building there and problems that you're solving there. Before we do, I do think people listening to this are going to be interested in, okay, 0 to 3,000 plus units, right, over the period of a few years. But I think you guys have taken a very intentional approach, right, to how you've grown the company up to this point. And I'm wondering if you guys could share a little more detail on how have you approached growing the company, to that size and scale, and what are some of the kind of like key things you focused on to get there?
So, one thing that was really apparent from the start for us was kind of the reputation management, right? And building a product that served a particular need and taking great care in the customer service aspect of it. So, we were hyper localized, focusing just in the Bay Area and from the start. And this was at a point, even though we had the aspirations and the intention of being fully remote and being, leveraging tech as much as possible, we still wanted to provide this high level of customer service to the point where Arvand and I would drive out and meet customers and drive them around and just be like, we can, you should really trust us. We know what we're doing, even though, we somewhat didn't at the time. But it helped build that kind of trust and set that expectation and threshold for kind of providing this, really hands-on high level of customer service so that, as we continue to grow, even within the Bay Area, making sure that we kept the reputation high, that we, moved forward with integrity, that one, those customers would refer other property management, other customers, right? So often is the case in property management where if you talk to someone and you're a landlord, you're like, oh, who's your property manager? If they only have great things to say about you, it really is a cascading snowball effect. And that was how we really kind of leveraged that growth from, property one to property 1,000 was being very intentional and still to this day of our reputation, moving forward with integrity and trying to have those high touch points, even though we're still trying to automate as many things as possible. We really wanted to automate the right things so that our staff could be there to give that high level of service. So that was kind of like the overarching ethos that we tried to kind of maintain as we, had this kind of rapid growth ascension from 2019 till now, pretty much.
Yeah, and just, I mean, I guess to summarize that, tech, our whole philosophy has been tech doesn't have to mean cheap or lower quality. And so when we first built the product, we didn't just throw a bunch of tech at it. We built it with a lot of high touch and a lot of customer service to keep up our reputation, but also built it with the intention that at some point in time, portions of this can be automated, not only to our benefit, but to the benefit of our customers so that they can get more rapid results out of our services. And so at first we had a lot more human touch points. Now we have a lot less, but arguably our quality of product has increased because we've only removed the portions that are just annoying for everyone, including our customers.
Yeah. And I guess are there, it sounds like a lot of, where your customers are coming from is through word of mouth and referral, right? From some of your existing customers, and that you guys are continually turning that flywheel. Are there other sources of advertising or customer acquisition that have been successful for you guys up to this point beyond that?
We've been fairly successful in, Google ads, PPC campaigns, and then, also advertising on Yelp. I'm sure every property manager has their own opinion on Yelp's place in the market and the game sometimes you have to play, be beholden to them. We've found that it's worth the headache often to kind of play the Yelp game. But those have been our two kind of bigger, kind of third party lead generation channels. We've played around with, I'm sure everyone's heard of Buildium had allpropertymanagement.com for a while. I'm sure a lot of your listeners have used them back in the day. I don't even know if it's still generating leads. But those were kind of our primary lead generation sources.
Well, so it sounds like some digital acquisition as well. You found some success with there.
Yeah.
So digging into a little bit more of kind of this tech platform, and it sounds like, hey, we're going to get really close to the problem, really close to the customer, hands-on, and really understand this deeply. And that it sounds like you guys were in the investment game and trying to solve these problems yourself, which I think is different from some other folks that we've seen who have tried to bring tech to the industry, right? And just immediately throw at it. But it sounds like you guys are staying close and really intentionally developing that to get improvements as you go. And what we often see with people building tech in the industry is there's a lot of activity and there's a lot of data in property management across the entire journey. And so it can be challenging kind of knowing where to start, where to focus and where you're going to be able to return that investment right on the development costs and distributing that, across your units. It sounds like though you guys have, reached a point, I think you shared, your company's profitable, right? Reached that point. And so I'm curious if you could speak to why you guys focused on tenant placement first, or can you speak to the tech platform, what's evolved? Are you still using any third-party tools versus building the entire thing yourself? Or how do you kind of see that working together as you're building your platform out?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll take a crack at that. So, from the perspective of why tenant placement first, maybe that'll be an easier one. Is my philosophy, at least a long time ago, before COVID, was always remote work. Why are we spending 2 hours commuting when we could just be there with technology and internet, et cetera? So when it comes to property management, it's a little bit more difficult, right? Because the property is in a specific location. But with technology, I found that, just piecemealing different products together, a landlord could remotely manage the property pretty well in this day and age, especially with tenants being more comfortable with technology as well. But tenant placement was a more difficult thing to tackle, especially before COVID. We were probably one of the first companies to aggressively utilize remote showings using lockboxes. Now it's like everybody's doing it, right? And COVID, in a sense, helped us because we started right before COVID. COVID happens. Before COVID, people would be like, I don't know if I'm okay with you guys just giving the key to a tenant. COVID happens, and there is no other choice. You can't meet them, so you got to let them just use a lockbox to get inside the unit if you want to get your property rented. And so that's like one aspect of the whole thing, right? There's a lot of different pieces of that tenant placement where the norm has been go in person, go into a leasing office, fill out an application, come in and sign a lease. So there's all of those things that we kind of slowly kind of did away with that I felt was not necessary to be able to introduce tech into it. And then from a holistic approach of how did we get here with our tech? I think what's important to note about our approach is that we built everything from the ground up. And this comes from my previous company. I mean, I had a web hosting company. I would essentially have servers that I would lease out to people who want to have websites. But I had a control panel and everything was off the shelf that I would buy from a software provider. I would install my servers and I would sell to our customers. When we started this, I said, look, I have the resources to build something from the ground up. And we literally did. Our phone system, it was built in-house. And that has nothing to do with property management per se, but that has everything to do with customer service. That is a big aspect of this, right? If I were to go out and get a piece of software from Appfolio and something else from Propertyware and put them all together to try and make it work, it's never going to feel like how our system is feeling right now, because we slowly built every aspect of it to exactly how we want to approach property management and the level of customer service we want to provide to the owners and tenants. And that's where I feel the difference is, and we're going to get surmountable gains as a result of it, because of the level of automation we can introduce into the process, given that it's all our software.
Yeah, and I think a lot of property managers are very focused right now on process, workflow automation. And, there's this big conversation in the industry of how can we work across more open systems over time, right? To be able to free up data and make it portable and operationalize it. But we're still not there yet, right? And so it sounds like you guys are building a platform that gives you that kind of flexibility to do that. What are some of the kind of like key outcomes that you guys are able to deliver through this tech-enabled automation? It's like, hey, old world, here's how it works. New world, here's how it's working now. From maybe we could start with the tenant placement of what you guys are really doing differently there.
Sure. So, when it comes to kind of the tenant placement product and tenant placement process for that matter is, at the end of the day, we wanted to focus on, being as efficient as possible when it comes to, reviewing applications, reducing vacancy time for our customers, right? Ultimately, that's one of, if not the biggest cost of any landlord is vacancy. So that's like problem number one. How do we solve vacancy? So the remote showings was certainly step one. Get more people in faster. Can do more showings per day, yielding you more applications per day, reducing that vacancy time. So then when it came to application processing, all of us as property managers know the gamut of different types of income statements and people's certain, like my move-in date. I'm a 1099, but I'm also a W-2, but here's my background check, here's my credit. And how can we use technology to efficiently analyze all of that information, normalize that data so that we can have a high degree of confidence saying, this person makes this much money, they have this credit, they have clean background check, here's your tenant, right? And do it in a way that, one is, fair to every applicant that comes in. They're all being judged by the same standard and removing sometimes the ambiguity of a human touch, right? Oftentimes, you get into these situations where you feel like, okay, there's some inherent biases that someone looking at an application may have. In this process, it removes those biases. It says, here is a certain set of conditions: income, credit, background, when's your move-in date? Here it is. We present it and are able to make decisions much more quickly and have owners ultimately make the decisions too. I know we're a little bit different in that owners have to sign off on who they want to choose, right? A lot of property management companies will have that autonomy themselves to just place the tenant and the owners just kick back and don't have to have any say in it. We've taken the process of wanting to be as transparent as possible because a lot of our customer base and what we found in the retail segment is that owners want to be involved to some extent, right? They want to have some say in what's going on in their property. And we've kind of set up our framework to help provide that sense of action and sense of control that they have. And we're working as a team rather than, hey, we're just going to take 10, 15% and do our thing, and kind of be this black box for them. And so on the tenant placement side, being able to fully automate that process to the point where we can list the property for an owner and within 24 hours, they can have a signed lease, depending on the volume of that day, just really makes them feel like they have a sense of control and know what's going on at their property. And we help facilitate that in a positive way. So that's like short story long of how we try to utilize tenant placement as kind of our main focal point when it comes to kind of like that, where that efficiency is gained, leveraging tech and automation.
And to put it in one sentence, if you were to click list in our platform on a property that's fully able to be listed, I've got photos and lockbox setup and all that, chances that property will get leased without any interaction from our side is over 50%. And it still provides a high level of service to both the tenant and the owner because the owner is still making a decision. The tenants are still getting their applications processed in 10, 15 minutes max. They're able to see the property on demand. And we're still there to provide support to both sides. But we take out the human factor that slows everything down.
Yeah, so I want to ask more about that, specifically in the screening process. And so when I think about income verification, when I think about employment verification, when I think about credit reports, right, and running that and the information on it and looking for delinquencies and utility payments, obviously landlord debt, et cetera, criminal background, in screening, how do you guys kind of manage a robust screening process and also some of the risk of fraudulent applicants or incomplete information coming through with, it sounds like, the really incredible speed, right? That you're able to move people through that process. And in most cases, like if I hear an application approved in 15 minutes and over half of them don't require any human intervention, as a part of that, that sounds interesting. And I'm curious, like how you guys kind of navigated some of those decisions of balancing, the quality and risk of placing the wrong tenant or a bad tenant or a fraudulent tenant against moving people through really quickly and conveniently through the process.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question because I feel like that's been our concentration for the last 2.5 years of essentially getting that process down. And I'd say, so it all comes from, the first thing is that we need data points, right? As many data points as possible. So let's use income as an example. We are asking for pay stubs, but then they can also use a platform to log into their payroll provider to give us that data. They could log into their bank accounts to essentially evaluate their deposits. And then there's obviously databases that provide income data instantly for like 20-30% of the population. So we never shot. If we just stopped at pay stubs and said, look, we got it right, we wouldn't have the complete picture, right? We never shy away from adding more data into our processing to make it as accurate as possible. And then when it comes to fraud, obviously the more data we have, the more we'll have the opportunity to say, hey, wait a second, this doesn't line up. Obviously, there's two types of fraud, right? There's someone faking their pay stub, et cetera. That is, our system is really good at catching that because we have different data points. Then there is straight up, identity theft, and that is a little bit more difficult to get around, and we all deal with that. But the benefit, though, that we came across as a result of employing this automation was, initially we had staff reading pay stubs, and as I would review this, I would see that, about 20% of the time they would be reading the wrong column. We're human, we make mistakes, right? And the moment we went into automated processing of pay stubs, we essentially have a system that reads the pay stub and then normalizes the data, right? That went down to like 2%, right? Computers rarely make mistakes. Sometimes they would read one number wrong out of, 1,000 pay stubs. So the quality of processing actually increased, meanwhile reducing the downtime of being able to get back to the applicant and say, hey, I have everything, but it's not enough. And that's the most important thing. I want to get back to the applicant and say, I have everything, you're good to go, I'm waiting on the owner, or I have everything, it's not enough, I still sent it to the owner, but give me more, and it'll help you out. And then on the owner side, right? Like if they're using our services versus doing it themselves, or using a different property management company that might not be doing it as programmatically, they're able to get back to the applicant within an hour or two if they're checking their emails and providing their approvals. Whereas someone else might take 2 days, and that means that person might lose on that applicant who is really just anxious to get going. It's housing. Housing is a serious issue. They want a roof over their head, so they're going to move fast. They will move fast if you move fast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you guys were mentioning the owners involved in the process. It sounds like, hey, maybe you're processing and really surfacing the data to help them make an informed decision. Maybe there's even some recommendation, that's happening there. But ultimately, they're retaining some of the decision authority for actually approving the applicant and moving them forward in the process. Did I understand that right?
Exactly. Yeah, we made it. It's part of this whole idea that, a lot of our customer base is what you find in single family homes and like the retail customer kind of section, is that oftentimes the types of owners are typically not investors who are looking at this from I'm trying to make this as efficient as possible, and I'm trying to maximize my NOI over my portfolio and all this and that. Most of our customers this was their first home, or this was their childhood home, or this was something that they inherited, or this was, there's some emotional value to it. And what we found over these last 4 or 5 years is that if you ultimately, majority of the customers want to feel involved and want to have some say in what's going on. And we've kind of taken this approach of being able to kind of shape like them to make the best decisions for their property, right? We're here to be that conduit to help and be a team where we say, hey, there's the best applicant that we feel out of all these applicant sets. You can review all of them. We're not going to take away that ability and create this black box, but here's your ability to make that decision and feel some sense of ownership, in this kind of management of the unit. We'd take away the burden and the kind of mundane aspects of it so that you feel that you have control, you can make a decision. We do all the hard work for you. And that's been helpful, I think, in creating that relationship with all of our customers where it's very much, a partnership as opposed to, I'm giving you the keys, just don't crash the car, and, they don't get upset when, they see every step of the process when whether it's the tenant we place or the repair that we do, the vendor that we pick, it all works out to be more mutually beneficial as opposed to we're just going to take our 10%, 15% if I'm a traditional and just do what we're going to do. So,
but you might ask, well, if you're just going to process an application and send some data to the owner and leave the decision making up to the owner, what makes you different than some off-the-shelf software that's either figured it out or on their way of figuring out exactly doing what we're doing? And that, you kind of hit that a little bit with your question, was there is a high emphasis on recommendation. I don't want to, we never really hit an owner with, what do you think? It's more like, give me a yes or no. Right? I don't want to waste their time with, what do you think? Because I'm the property manager. I should know what you should think. But I want to still make sure that you're okay with what you should be thinking. And so, we have a zip score. As a zip score comes up with a price based off of income credit. And we surface that and we say, look, at this zip score, I would 100% move forward with this. Just say yes. Or look, we're on the cusp here. This is what I would do in this decision. And the software makes those recommendations and gives them the button to press to say, let's go ahead. But then, about 50% of the time, they still have questions, right? And that's where our staff come in. And that's why we're a property manager, not just a software as a service.
Yeah. I think it's interesting of you guys clearly are saying, hey, we're really trying to provide transparency and all the information somebody would need to make a decision. We're bringing our expertise, right, and our insights to that to probably a less educated customer than us who doesn't have as many at-bats with this, right, and experience with this. And so you can bring that value, but by allowing them to be involved, right, in the decision and have some authority, it's a little less like if something were to happen later, hey, we did talk about this risk, right, at the time, and sometimes things happen, et cetera, but they were involved in the decision versus saying, oh, my property manager is no good, so to speak, and taking on the blame for that. It sounds like that transparency and engagement applies not just to tenant placement, but also even maintenance decisions or other things throughout the process that you're educating them on. Is that right?
You're absolutely right. I think it is from that perspective, but I never go back and say, hey, I told you so, right? I'm still the broker of record. I'm still the property manager. It is on me as much as it's partially on you because you approved it, right? So we'll make things right for our customers if things go wrong, which they do. We're not in a perfect world. At the same time, they were there as part of that decision-making body to make sure that everything was in place in accordance to how they view their properties management.
Well, I've got one kind of final question on this, which is, I imagine the number of clients you guys have amassed, et cetera, that I just hear stories from property managers of a property owner who wants to make a decision that could violate a fair housing, law or be non-compliant, or could just be radically outside of their self-interest and ultimately, maybe even a boundary where I'm not sure we'd even want to manage this anymore from your perspective to go that kind of direction. Do you guys ever encounter those kind of situations? And how do you handle that conversation? How does that go in those kind of scenarios, if so?
Yeah, we certainly encounter it. It's unavoidable in our industry. It's just, it really comes down to, our staff. This is where having that kind of high touch point and having the staff available to have those difficult conversations with owners, if they're going to skirt this line or cross this boundary that we know is not appropriate, we are confident in our ability to have those conversations and make sure that the owner is, if an owner wants to proceed in a way that is not compliant or is not kosher in whatever particular instance, that we're able to say we don't feel comfortable doing this. We're not going to be your property manager moving forward, right? We don't hold we don't our property management agreements are essentially month to month, right? We don't lock clients into, you know, to annual contracts or anything like that. It's, you know, one, it's a hedge on ourselves that we are confident in our ability to, you know, not have to lock anyone annually in because we're confident in our ability to provide a high level of service. But it's also to protect ourselves from owners who may want to go against this grain or this norm, and allows us to take a stance that, you know, we're not going to go across this boundary with you. And so, you know, it's unfortunate when those conversations come up, but our staff does a really good job of knowing where those boundaries are, knowing how to have those difficult conversations, and taking the appropriate action so that, you know, we don't find ourselves in a situation where fair housing was violated or an owner just like took a stance that was completely inappropriate, you know. And so just one of those things you always have to battle. But we try and set expectations from the start that like that behavior is not going to be tolerated. So, you know, if we see a red flag in an owner from the moment they get onboarded, we're pretty quick to be like, we don't maybe think this is the right fit, so that we don't find ourselves down the line in a more precarious situation where it's maybe a little bit more difficult to part ways.
Yeah, I would say it's the expectation setting, having your reputation management done right, so that an owner, when they look at our reviews, are like, these guys know what they're doing. Maybe I should listen to them, right? If you have poor reviews, then every decision that you're trying to get out of an owner gets questioned. And then finally being there, right? Like we don't want to end that, hey, we're not going to be your property manager because you're making a bad decision. We want to have that conversation and convince them to make the right decision, because that's the best thing for them, that's the best thing for us, and that's the best thing for the tenants as well. But just, you know, all of those three: expectation setting, reputation management, and having that conversation in a nice way to try and convince them to do the right thing.
Cool. Well, hey, guys, really appreciate digging into that. You know, with the time that we have left, I'd love to hit one or two other things, which we've dug in a lot here in the tenant placement, which really feels like your guys kind of like gold medal talent, and really kind of what you guys have really focused on building a great process and system around and policies around. Are there other opportunities as you think about like the occupied experience or other places? I mean, I'm just imagining, it seems like you guys are really focused on high touch and you're resourcing enough with the team, right, to be able to really provide support to property owners and residents in these scenarios, as you're also building the tech to automate some of the mundane and routine away. And I'm just curious, you know, if you were to say, hey, there's one or two other big things that you guys have done that have had a big impact on your company's success and the different kind of experience you're able to provide, or, you know, your company's profitability, or both, what comes to mind as something that you guys do differently or uniquely well?
I guess, you know, when you kind of think about how we've impacted the tenant placement cycle, it's taking out those waiting periods where people are waiting, tenants or owners are waiting on our staff to do something. So as we go into the rest of the process, we try to do the same, right? Like, for example, repairs. You know, a tenant puts in a repair request. There is that period where the owner gets to approve repairs, but that we can't help much besides setting more expectations and providing even more data to get them to make the decision quicker. But we could present everything to them quicker. So we have an automated bid collection process before we go out there, and you say, hey, what do you think about this? How much do you charge to go out there? You know, we get 3 bids from 3 different pest companies. Now that's pretty much automated. Same thing with dispatch, right? As soon as the owner says, okay, you're not waiting on our staff to say go. The system says go. Because why are you waiting? Why would you wait for a human to say go when you already know they need to go, right? So the vendor is notified, the tenant is notified, they connect, they set a schedule and they get going. And then also the invoicing. And when it comes to repairs, it's even a more difficult challenge, I feel like, than tenant placement, because tenant placement, you have three stakeholders. It's us, the tenant, and the owner. With repairs, you have the vendor involved. And so you also want to take care of the vendors so that they're there for you and your owners. So now, the vendors can upload their own invoices and get paid faster, right? Why are you waiting for someone on my side to upload an invoice and press pay? Do it yourself, get paid faster. And everyone would rather do that. So that's an example of repairs, right? And now we're just kind of getting into, evaluating walkthroughs. That's all have been done manually. That's a little bit more complex and a little bit more leaning towards AI, but we've started leveraging it and comparing an AI evaluation of a walkthrough versus a human evaluation of a walkthrough, and it's actually more accurate, right? And the more accuracy you add to the process, the more you have an owner trust you, and the more you have a tenant trust you. And that trust is what bonds us all together to be able to properly manage a property and have a happy tenant and a happy owner. So those are just kind of some of the examples. You can tell, right? Like even in onboarding, now we're getting to a point where if an owner wants to get going, they can sign a property management agreement and update some of the dates that they're available, and a photographer gets dispatched automatically. Because I don't want to lose out on that vacancy period. If I can get a photographer there today and list tomorrow, as opposed to a week from now, I just saved you 7 days.
Yeah. Yeah, those are great examples. Nick, were you going to add something there?
No, that was it. It's really kind of being beholden to this whole ethos of finding that right balance of like, where can we leverage as much automation as possible to make everyone's life easier and provide as much confidence in the data that we're having being presented, making more informed decisions more quickly, and still providing that high level experience. Like that's always kind of what's pushing us on the development side. And what was a benefit of us not going the third party route of like picking a Yardi, picking an Appfolio, even though we feel, we're opinionated in a lot of ways in how we approach property management, and having developed our own system, even to the, dismay of everyone who says, don't build your own system, just use something off the shelf. For us, it's really worked and has helped us kind of achieve that rapid growth quickly, because we're able to iterate, make decisions more quickly, build out functionality, so that we can help progress and make a better owner experience, tenant experience, vendor experience. And that's been kind of that rocket fuel for us to kind of grow so quickly, in an industry that, for us to grow this fast without acquisitions I don't know of many companies who have gotten to this scale as fast as us. So yeah, it's a fun time to be in the property management space, especially seeing everyone kind of approach it in a different way and kind of getting that feedback from customers and seeing what can we do to make ourselves differentiate in an otherwise kind of saturated industry, right? There's a million property management companies. So how can you really differentiate yourself in the most positive ways possible? Yeah.
One thing I really appreciate about you guys in this conversation is, somebody might listen to this and they may have a different perspective about what's most important, in prioritizing or how they organize their company and what kind of experience they're providing for their customers. But there's no arguing that you guys are clear on your opinion and your point of view, right? Which is, it's in your name and your brand promise, right? Of Ziprent, of like, you're clearly providing speed and convenience and immediacy at points of the process that have, economic impact and experiential impact for residents, investors, right? Your team. And obviously you guys have some really great momentum, right? To show for the success you guys have created so far. So I've really enjoyed the conversation and getting to know you guys better. If people are interested in learning more about Ziprent or connecting with you guys, what would be the best place for them to look at going to do that?
Yeah, so I would say, both Nick and I are very hands-on with our approach in managing the business. So reach out to us directly. It's just my name at ziprent.com, Nick@ziprent.com. Pretty simple. We read our emails, we respond to our emails. there's a big emphasis on our part with, being highly responsive within our teams, and that starts with us, and the rest of our management staff, and then the rest of the team. The other thing that we've been kind of concentrating on is, obviously we've gotten to a point where we feel like we've built something great based off of a property management direction, right? Our software does have attitude, and that attitude is our attitude that's just been kind of relayed onto it. But if it's something that jives for some aspect of our industry, and we can cut costs for some of the other property managers, and why not do that? So we've started building kind of a white label API to offer it to some of our competitors. If we have a property manager, especially in a region where we're not really present, and we can save them 50% on their tenant placement costs, and have them concentrating on growing their business in a fashion that they trust and that they can leverage how they want. We would love to do that, and that's kind of the next chapter, I think, for us, is taking what we built, putting all this effort into, and offering that out so that everyone can benefit from it, as opposed to just our direct customers.
Awesome. Well, Arvand, Nick, really appreciate you coming on the pod today and sharing generously, pulling back the curtain on what you guys have been working on at Ziprent. I think it's really interesting. Excited to continue to track your guys' progress and success in the years ahead. Thanks again.
Cheers. Thanks, Andrew.
And that wraps up another episode of the Triple Win Property Management Podcast. Thank you for pressing play. We hope you've gained valuable insights and inspiration. The Triple Win Property Management Podcast is proudly produced and distributed by Second Nature, where we believe in a triple win, building winning experiences for your residents, investors, and your teams with the only fully managed resident benefits package. Visit secondnature.com to learn more and talk to an RBP expert in your area. If you have any questions, comments, or want to weigh in on the conversation, we'd love to hear from you. Email triplewin@secondnature.com. That's triplewin@secondnature.com. Stay connected with us beyond the podcast. Visit our website at secondnature.com to stay updated with upcoming property management events and articles. And don't forget, you can keep the conversation going in the Triple Win Property Management Facebook group. It's exclusively for property managers. To receive even more valuable insights and updates, subscribe to our newsletter. You can find the link to that and much more in the show notes. On behalf of the Triple Win community, this is Laura Mack, thanking you for tuning in. And on behalf of Second Nature, this is Carol Housel. Check back soon for another exciting episode. Until then, keep striving for that triple win.